Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special program. I am Jenny Levine, Adult Services Librarian, and we are very excited to share this collaboration between Durham County Library and Duke Arts. This discussion will be facilitated by Carter Q, Adult Services Librarian for Stanford L. Warren Library. Supporting materials are provided by Lauren Menges, head of the North Carolina collection here at Durham County Library. Mr. Q will be speaking with Duke Arts Artist-in-Residence Mario Moore. Here to tell you a bit more about the Artist-in-Residence program at Duke Arts is Bill Fick, Assistant Director of Visual and Studio Arts at the Rubenstein Arts Center at Duke University.
Hello, I'm Bill Fick, Assistant Director for Visual and Studio Arts at the Rubenstein Arts Center. I'm also the coordinator for the Mario Moore Artist Residency that is part of the Duke Arts Artist in Residency program at Duke. I'm also a faculty member in the Department of Art History, and Visual Studies, so lots of different hats. I'd like to thank the Durham Public Library for allowing us to do this and work with Mario and to interview Mario, because it's very important that we get out into the community and share this amazing artist. The residency program is basically just that. It's a simple thing where we bring in international artists. We bring the artists in to interact with the students, the faculty, the staff, and really important for them to get out into the community and get to know Durham. We're very excited about this program, and thank you very much.
And now we'll get right to that interview.
My name is Carter Q, and I am an adult services librarian at the Stanford Warren Branch Library, but currently at the North Carolina collection here at the main library, Durham, North Carolina. We're here today to talk with artist in residence, Mario Moore, native of Detroit, Michigan, Motor City. Mario, could you tell us something about yourself and why you decided to become an artist and why Duke University for this residency in 2022 during the time of worldwide COVID?
Oh yeah, it's a lot going on. I'm an artist, and what has driven me to become an artist, I would say, is my family. My mom's an artist. So that has been the kind of drive to make work and create, and also seeing great art as a child growing up, going to different museums. And it was always an idea or a concept of seeing my mom and her friends, who were also artists, make something out of nothing. Right? You look at this blank canvas, and all of a sudden there's some magic on it, and I wanted to know how to do that. And that's what has I guess kept me pursuing art and making art, right? Because I think a lot of people think, making art is like, finger painting. You go in, you have a great time, and it's a really great experience, and that's true, but it's also work. And what's brought me here to Durham, to Duke, is I did a portrait of Wilhelmina Reuben Cook to dedicate the new building that Duke dedicated to her. And through that, I got this residency opportunity.
Mario, you mentioned your mother, Sabrina Nelson, who is an acclaimed artist in her own right. How has she impacted your practice and perspective as an artist?
I would say that if my mom was not an artist, it's not just the fact that she's an artist, right? She makes, but I grew up in an environment where we were always around creative people. We would go to different lectures, and to make me be quiet, she'd put a sketchbook in my hand. If we go into a talk, right? Because I bet not be making too much noise. So just growing up, seeing her have shows, go to galleries, and also being in the kind of community with her friends has kind of inspired me to want to make that a part of my life, right? As a career. But also the fact that she's an artist and that she goes to these different places. Like whenever we go out of town, we would go to a museum. We would go check out art museums, and we would, sometimes go do drawing in the galleries, at different museums. So that kind of upbringing has driven me to make art. I also have an older sibling, so it's not just a thing where my mom's making art and art is all around me, so I must become an artist because my older sister is an artist. But it was just something that I really, really loved. Yeah.
And was Was your mother a full-time artist, or was she a teaching? Did she teach on the side, or?
I would say any artist is gonna say that they a full-time artist because that's just the truth, right? You are an artist, and your side job, whether it's a full-time job or part-time job, is your side job.
Right,
So
right.
she's a admissions counselor at the College of Creative Studies,
Okay.
and she's also taught at community colleges. I remember growing up going to some of her classes that she taught in these different schools. So yeah, she's been teaching all over, and I think she's taught some classes in high school too. But the longest kind of job in her career has been associated with the College of Creative Studies. So she's always been working for sure, but art is her.
It's in her DNA. That's who
Yeah,
she is.
exactly. Because my grandfather's an artist also.
Oh, wow. So I guess that means you never got the stories about being a starving artist and listen, we don't want you to go that route. Go get a job as a medical doctor.
I heard that from a lot of my friends, because they were, their parents would be like, "You want to go to art school? What you gonna do there? How you gonna make a living? How you gonna make a career? And we want you to become a lawyer." And so I never had that conversation. My dad is also an admirer of art, so he supported me, even though he really didn't understand. You know what I mean? Like how what I'm gonna do after I finish school. He still was supportive. You still have some times where he's like, "Hey, there's these jobs that's available. You should apply to these jobs." And I'm like, usually they're like curator jobs or different jobs at our museums, and I'm like, that's actually counter to what I want to do. I wanted my work to be in the museum, not curating the collections.
That's right.
So yeah, but I've always had that support.
Mario, a few years ago, you had brain surgery, and how did that surgery and your subsequent recovery affect your outlook on life and even your practice as an artist?
It's a good question. I would say because what we're dealing with now with COVID, right? Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people are realizing their human existence, right? The kind of tenuousness that we kind of exist in, right? That at a moment anybody can be gone, and I think for me that finding out I had a tumor, and then the subsequent finding out I had to have brain surgery, was that moment for me where it's like, oh man, I might not be here, after this time. So you start to think about things, I think, differently, right? And you start to appreciate things, and you want to do more. And it was also a moment for me where after the surgery, I never rested, right? So I had my body had to physically rest, and I had to really slow down, and you kind of just take account of things that matter to you. Right, so that had a big change on, I think, how I kind of pursued my work from then on. I think in a really good way, right? I've always been adamant about making, but it's like, oh man, my time, there's a limit to my time, right? So let me do as much as I can, and then I followed up with the body of work that was all about rest and recovery.
Now, Mario, I noticed that with a lot of your paintings, your drawings, and your prints, they seem to be primarily figurative in nature, very, very narrative, historical content. What's the impetus for your working in this particular manner?
For me, it's about how can I get as many people as possible to look at what I make, and the logic in my mind for that is that no matter who's coming to see the work, whether they study art history or whether they're an art student or, have some understanding of art, or as a person just off the street that knows nothing about, Western art history or anything like that, I want to kind of keep it open in that way where you can have somebody from any walk of life kind of come into the work and say, okay, I understand what's going on here. And even when there's additional symbols and metaphors, then they can dive deeper into the work. So for me, it's always been I think a powerful thing to have it be where the figures within the work feel like they can walk into your space, or as a viewer you feel like you are coming into their space, right? And I think empathy is heavily involved with my work, right? How can I be empathetic to the people that are viewing the work, and how can they approach the work with an open eye?
So I guess that means you won't be doing too much too much abstraction.
Well, I like, it's interesting because I know, Kerry James Marshall, one of my favorite artists, like ever. I think he has a little joke that he plays with abstraction, right? He makes certain works that kind of shoot a ploy at the kind of what he calls the limits of abstraction, right? I think there's so much we can say more with figurative work, but for me, some of the best figurative work has elements of abstraction.
Well, I guess you could see that with some. I mean, because I've looked at some of the symbols that are employed, that you've employed in some of your work. I mean, you definitely see those aspects and elements of abstraction there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the artists that I like Velázquez and Rembrandt, when you look at those paintings, I mean, you get up close, you're looking at an abstract painting. If you go in and do like this, it could be a straight up Ed Clark, like all the way. Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of the oil paint itself and what you can do with that material. And for me, those are the works that I'm kind of drawn to. And also the fact that a lot of my mother's friends were abstract painters. So, I grew up just around everybody making all different kinds of work. So, yeah, I don't know if I ever make a strictly abstract painting.
Right.
But I feel like it's important that I have some elements of that within the work that I make. Yeah.
So, Mario, other than your mother, who you said has been a great influence on you personally and professionally, who are some other creatives and visual artists that have played an important part in your development as an artist and continue to do so?
I would say one of the earliest actually was I don't think I've ever said this before, but he just popped in my head, was I went to a elementary middle school called Malcolm X Academy in Detroit. But the art teacher, he was a white man. He was awesome. His name was Mr. Michaels. And he gave me, my mom has a whole bunch of art books, so I had the gamut of kind of exploring whatever I wanted to explore, but he gave me my first art book. And I held on to that thing. It's this little small thing, and it was so precious, and it was so much in there that I took and was like, wow, this is mine, to have. And I think he kind of gave me liberties and different assignments and things like that. But beyond him, somebody that continues to kind of influence me and who was a big kind of factor in my development as an artist is Richard Lewis, who's a really good friend of my mom's. And he actually taught me how to paint in oils. And that was my sophomore year of high school. I think it was the summer in between sophomore and junior year. My dad, he kept telling me, because my dad is really into antiques, and he was like, you got to paint in oils. You got to paint in oils. We ain't going to paint in oils. 'Cause I was doing a lot of drawings and colored pencil, and drawing just felt really natural to me, And he just kept bugging me about, painting in oils. And I asked my mom, hey, could you talk to Richard? I would love to, see if he could let me work on a painting with him. And I was at his house like that whole summer working on an oil painting, and we were doing a still life. And he was on the opposite side of me. And he was painting and I was painting, and I would turn around and look at his painting. I'm like, what are you doing that I'm not doing? Because my result is not turning out like yours. But I learned so much from him. Yeah, he continues to inspire me with his paintings.
So oils are your medium of preference?
Yep. Oils all the way. I mean, I learned a lot actually in undergrad with acrylic, but oils because I just love the way it looks, the material looks, what you can do with it.
Tell me a little bit about process, your painting process. Are you using some preliminary sketches? Are you putting putting some marks on the canvas, or
I always tell people it's for me it's a concept first. So it's always concept driven. So whatever the idea is what I consider turning that idea into, right? Because I make paintings, but also make sculpture. I make videos. I make drawings. So the concept is the most important thing. And from that concept, I say, okay, what's the best way to kind of, what material is going to work best for this concept? So then I do go to the sketchbook. I'll draw like a little thumbnail or something, jot down some ideas. And then usually I'm trying to find people to pose for me to kind of fit the concept. I might go further and do a more refined sketch, but for the most part, I kind of got the little really jumbly looking sketch, and I go with that. And then, I kind of designed it all out, and then I go directly to the painting. Because I feel like it's pointless for me to make a refined drawing that's the exact copy of what I'm going to be making, because then I lose the excitement of actually doing the painting. I don't want the painting to be finished before I begin on it. But it's always concept driven.
You utilize any background ambience when you paint, or hip hop, or
everything. I use I'm listening to a lot of different. It depends on how I'm feeling. Like sometimes I want to feel like I'm in a club,
Yeah.
Sometimes I want to feel like I'm at a jazz spot.
Yeah.
Sometimes I turn on the radio just to have the radio host feel like somebody's in the room with me.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Wow.
Because painting is a very solitary thing, right? Being an artist, I think you spend a lot of time alone. So sometimes just that is cool,
right.
or sometimes I want to get real theoretical and I want to listen to some real deep hip hop or something like that. So it just depends, but I'm always listening to music for sure.
So,
and sometimes I watch documentaries. I'm not really watching it, but
that's
more
right.
so listening.
That's right.
But yeah, it's I think music is so important, and then a lot of times I'm listening to Motown.
Oh yeah. So Mario, we're here in the North Carolina collection of the Durham County Main Library. So, what role do you think the study or reading of history means to you as a visual artist?
I would say it's always been incredibly important, but more recently, I have been doing a lot of research before beginning bodies of work. So I would say my art practice is heavily research based. More specifically, in the recent body of work that I've done was talking about the comparisons between what happened during the Civil War and before, and what we are facing at the moment politically and economically now, right? There was a lot of stuff happening, especially January 6th, that were eerily similar to the kind of explosion of the Civil War. So the body of work that I did was talking about that kind of cyclical thing that happens, right? When we don't really kind of tackle the issue, it can last forever, right? So the work kind of divots between the history and the present. So it's pulling both of those things back and forth. And I pursued that body of work by doing a whole bunch of reading. I was actually looking up some history of my family, found out a member of my family who fought in the Civil War, and then more specifically looking up research on Black Negro regiments. And that was heavily research based. So it's definitely important to me. I'm always pulling inspiration for stuff from everywhere. Things that I read, my life, my existence, on this planet. So yeah.
So it sounds like if you hadn't been the artist that you are, you'd been a great history professor.
Oh yeah, man. Well, I love history. Me and my dad used to watch like a lot of history stuff. So I'm like, yeah, history is just fascinating to me.
You've incorporated bits and pieces of your own family history, your own family narrative into a lot of your paintings. So what is that significance mean to you as a visual artist?
Well, I think this is a question that I feel like a lot of contemporary artists are kind of pursuing or trying to answer, but it's this idea of of you trying to have your artwork open to everyone, right? Which honestly is not a reality. Coming from an individual, every individual's perspective is going to be kind of tarnished to their experiences and the things that they're exposed to. So for me, it's like I get pretty specific, because in that way, right, thinking about empathy again, I feel like people can enter into that story and find a part of themselves, right, in that history. So when I'm going and doing a body of work that's about a restaurant that my grandfather owned in the 1950s in Detroit, right, I'm talking about a broader history about owning a business, right? I'm talking about a history of black businesses that were closed down because of, communities that were paved over for freeways. But I'm also talking about how black-owned businesses weren't getting those PPE loans during COVID, right? So it's these connections, but it's also points where people can come into the work and say, okay, I know something about this, or maybe I don't, but this sounds like another experience that I am familiar with. Or maybe it's about the business side, or maybe it's about the kind of just the individual. But I think when you are specific in a way, you kind of open it up more so than if you try to be general in what you're trying to make.
Well, if you would not have said Detroit, I could have juxtaposed Durham.
Exactly.
With those experiences. And so, since you've been here, have you seen bits and pieces of the Detroit narrative?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think all around the country right now, the idea of some cities that might have been left behind, or you had flight, right? There's a lot of people that are moving back to the core or center of an area, and gentrification. You can notice it when you see it, right? So it's really happening everywhere, and almost everywhere I go. So there's similarities with that, and there's also similarities, I think, that I have seen where there's a lot of buildings with signs up for sale or lease, right? And that's talking about a certain past, but that's also something very contemporary, right? Dealing with COVID,
Right.
So that's having an effect. There was a restaurant that I saw, and I was like, "Oh, I want to try that." So I walked past it, and everything was taken out of it. So the signage is still up, but that must have closed because of COVID.
So you mentioned your love of books and study and history. You have any particular books that are just must reads, or do you have any particular genres that you are really into right now?
So one that's really great but also really terrible in a good way is this book called Medical Apartheid.
Oh yeah.
That's a brutal book, but it's really informative. And I used that actually for a series of work or some ideas that I went through for body work earlier. But what I'm reading right now is actually a book by Imani Perry called South to America.
South to America.
It just came out,
Yeah,
and I'm like, it's great. It's really, really great. So that's really exciting to me. Again, because I'm in Durham, I'm in North Carolina, so I think it's interesting to think about what America means, right, from the South. And the South, I think, gets put in this weird position, or it's always the bad guy, right? In the kind of historical context of America, when there's so much more to it than that. So that's the book that I'm reading right now.
Over the past 4 or 5 years, there's been a greater awareness and interest in black artists by the mainstream media, the quote-unquote art market, dealers, museums, auction houses. Do you think this is one of these flash in the pan moments, another Harlem Renaissance, or do you think that this is going to be something that's going to be ongoing?
I think it can be. It can be a flash moment. And I think it's upon the artists and the relationships that they have with the galleries and the board members at museums and the collectors to make sure that it's not, right? Because I think what we're talking about a lot is the the secondary art market and the art market of what people are picking up individually and then what they're selling at auction. which is extremely high and kind of black artists, but what we see in the museum collections is still way, way low. The percentage of black artists that are in museum collections are well below what we have been fed in the contemporary media about this kind of explosion of black art, which is, there's a truth there, but I think it can be a similar thing in a very different way, because there's more happening now than it was during the Harlem Renaissance, right? So it's technically a new kind of renaissance in the kind of consumption of the work. But I think if artists don't make those connections and kind of hold people's feet to the fire, then it can be this thing that can just pass over, right? Because what's hot now is not gonna be hot tomorrow, right?
Right.
So I think it's upon the artists and the people that are on boards of museums, especially the museums, to kind of step up and make sure this is something that is rectified, to kind of tell a more complete history of American art, right? Or art in general that we see in museum collections.
Well, the thing that there was a HBO documentary. I think, what was that? Art Blacklight.
Yeah, it was. I think it was called not Black Art in the Night, but it was something like, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Something like that. Yeah.
The thing that I recall, because I knew him very well in that, I recall, Dr. David Driscoll was saying, and people were talking about some other museum entities, and Professor Driscoll, was a product of historical Black College University, and he worked it when we went back to Fisk, graduated from Howard University, but he said, no. Wait a minute. Historic Black colleges and universities were doing this, were promoting African American artists before other people came on the scene. And and so one of the things that I've noticed, sure, Mario Moore could go to a Yale University, get his MFA from Yale, and it seems as though many of the up and coming, very, very popular African American artists are coming from Ivy League schools. What do you think it's going to take to have them to once again come from a Howard University, come from a Fisk, and have that trend of artists go to these historic Black college universities? I
think the thing about that, and I think this also has to do with, I think there was this huge debate about the Toni Morrison papers, right? And it going to Howard, right, versus going to Princeton. And Princeton got the papers because Princeton got the money.
Right.
And that's a problem, right? It's we're talking about what institution can support whatever that thing is, right, with the funds, and who gets the grants, who gets the donations. So more support has to be given to HBCUs in that way.
Right.
And I think with institutions like that getting more support and funds, then you have an opportunity. It's also about, getting some great professors to teach there for the art programs. And I think there are schools that are doing really amazing, like Xavier University.
Yeah.
They have an incredible art program. I went in and saw their studios. I saw their printmaking facility, and I was like, oh, this is beating out like so many other art schools, So I think it's just where the support goes. Institutions like that seeing the benefit of a really good art program, and also, the thing about what's gonna happen in this moment or happen afterwards, like we're always gonna make art. Like we're not gonna stop making art.
Right.
you know. But for the support, just growing up with my mom, we would, go to all the galleries, in Detroit, and there was a little segregation as far as, where Black artists showed and where white artists showed. But we would go to both of those places, and then we still had the support of our community. So I think as even if this is a hype moment or whatever,
Right.
we're still gonna be making. I'm still gonna be making
right,
paintings
right.
and the work that I make, and hopefully I'll still have the support of the people that believe in my work. So yeah, that's I think that's regardless. It's not like these artists just started making work right in this hype moment, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm reminded of what took place. You call it the George Floyd moment, when there was a great deal of support that came about in various sectors of the country after that particular moment. So, what do you think about do you think there was a George Floyd moment, George Floyd impact relative to the art world?
Yeah, there's always the art world is weird. It's really strange, but there's always something going on, and I think for the most part, the art world has been behind in a lot of what you can say cultural shifts or civil rights, if we want to consider that in the art world. But as far as expanding on or considering black artists in the kind of contemporary moment of art, right, it's just way well below that. We talk about Kerry James Marshall again. He did this one piece where he's talking about the auction numbers. And he was listing all these numbers of some of the wealthiest white male artists who sell their work for millions and millions of dollars. And then you have somebody who is Basquiat, one of the most famous artists, you can say almost ever, because he's on everybody's tongue all the time. But his numbers weren't nowhere near, the numbers that these artists were selling. So even though we're in this moment of kind of hyper visibility, it's still like the truth of that is that somebody else might be selling something for 70 million or 80 million, and then you see a black artist that their stuff might go to auction for 4 million or 8 million. Right. So it's still a way to go. Yeah, for sure.
One of the things that I'm very glad to see, when you look at the participation by millennials and young people, younger black people, when it comes to supporting artists and supporting arts organizations. I mean, obviously back in the 70s, of course, and artists were operating in the environment, in the communities that gave them some support. And so obviously, Elizabeth Catlett and would not be at a Jack Shaman's gallery or Michael Rosenfeld's gallery, as a matter of fact, and even Norman Lewis, didn't get his just due and his just recognition until really very recently. And that is the case with so many of the older African American artists who are now seen as the best thing since sliced bread.
They're making a scramble now.
Oh yeah.
They we need to find all the old black artists out there because we need one on our roster.
Yeah,
right? It's this crazy
supply.
scramble.
I mean, and I know, and obviously it's supply and demand because this is it. So and I think one of the things that I can definitely say in terms of black cultural arts organizations, particularly those going from the 70s into the 80s, was that there was a recognition, I think, by the founders and participants in those organizations and many of the artists who said that, listen, I'm going to make my artwork affordable. I want black folk to have my work. And you could buy print by Elizabeth Catlett for $200. You could buy something from Samela Lewis very, very inexpensively. And actually, believe it or not, even though his work, costs thousands of dollars now, but Sam Gilliam was very, very clear. I want black people to have my artwork. I want them to be able to afford the artwork. So, with that being said, what's your opinion of some of these prices? I mean, they cost more than a house if you can find the artwork now.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it this way. I make art because I want to and I love to do it, right? But I also have to make a living from it.
Right.
Right?
Right.
I think about, when you go to your doctor's office and you ask for that bill, say, hey, can I get a discount on this, on this surgery,
Yeah.
And the reality is, and again, right, this is not, because I think it's kind of awful to compare, but I don't think white male artists have a problem with how much their work is selling for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're complaining about selling their work for, millions and millions of dollars.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, for us it's a little bit different because we want to be able to maintain a practice, but also be able to have people that look like you be able to buy the work also. Somebody I know, Derek Adams, for a long time,
Oh, yeah.
his
No,
work
Derek,
was
yeah.
in a really good price range because he wanted people to be able to buy his work. Now his work is,
Right.
it's up there.
Right.
Everybody ain't gonna be able to get a Derek Adams. But I also think you, as an artist, you should consider different work. Like my larger work doesn't cost the same as my smaller work.
Right.
My drawings are different from my paintings, and
Right.
my etchings are different from my drawings. And it's also a well-known secret that a lot of people buy work on a payment plan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah.
a lot of people do not know that. So, and I think that's more of an information to the community about art, right?
Right.
That the idea that you're going to buy artwork on a payment plan is something that's not known. It's something
Sure.
galleries don't talk
Sure.
about. They probably don't even want you to know,
Right,
but
right,
it's
right,
a known thing, right? So if you're trying to buy something and maybe it costs $3,000 or whatever, then you can get on the payment plan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah.
I'm telling you, artists will be happy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and I tell you, I was, talking about, how much prints used to cost, when they would literally sell them almost through subscription through Ebony and Jet. They used to have advertisements, and you can go and buy something. And of course, in that $250 in 1975, that was a lot of money. And so of course, obviously, there was a sacrifice that came for even those people who decided to do that. And of course, I think now, there's so many artists. Everybody's an artist. But I wanted to ask you. But because everybody's an artist, everybody considers themselves to be an artist. You hang your shingle out, and I see it now. It's like everybody I come across now. Well, hey, I paint.
Yeah,
even if they're doodling or doing some finger painting or something. Yeah. But do you think the more the merrier is the best? Because I've started to wonder, even if some of the galleries understand what's good and what's not good.
Depends on what gallery it is.
Right.
There's some galleries who don't care and they're all about the money. Then there's galleries who care genuinely about the artist and the work that's being made. So there's a difference there. I might get beat up by some of my artist friends, but I firmly believe that a lot of people are artists, right? Mm. It's just learning how to channel what that is about being creative. Now, will you make good art? I don't know. But can you make art? Yeah. But, is it going to warrant the kind of investigation and, how you can really get into what you're making and why you're making it? I don't know. There is a surplus of a lot of bad art being made.
But it sells, and as long as there's somebody to sell it and somebody to buy it.
Somebody gonna buy it. Exactly. Somebody gonna buy it. Yeah. It's ultimately when it comes down to it, it's ultimately what the collector wants to buy. If they genuinely like the work, then that's what they like. Or are they thinking about buying it just because they're gonna sell it on the secondary market a week after they originally buy it, and then sell it for a whole bunch more than they bought it for? I don't have a problem with all the artists that are making work, because I'm always gonna make my work, so I can't worry about what everybody else is doing. But again, like, you know, I think everybody can make art, but
Right.
is it going to be good?
I think really, you know, if you go back to the 1950s, and we'll use New York as an example. You know, when those abstractionists were meeting at the Cedar Tavern, and I think de Kooning and Rothko and everyone meeting, I think that when they looked at what was the quote unquote, you know, I hear people talk about the art market, but what there may have been a good 150 collectors and artists combined. You know, really at the height of when Jackson Pollock became America's greatest painter.
Yep.
You know, and so now when you look now, I mean, you know, you see some galleries that they may have close to 50 artists on the roster.
Very true, and but that's also a part of college and universities, right? And art schools, and then you know, taking in people and telling them that they're artists once they leave, right? And then imbuing them with so much debt, you know, to pay to go to art school, right? So I think art programs in university and colleges are part of that problem, like, you know, and I don't know if that's a vetting thing. I don't know if that's a thing where they come in with their portfolio and they say, yeah, this is okay, and then, you know, they still don't know what they're doing once they graduate, you know. And that's why it's so many artists now, because so many people are going into these programs and they're getting validated by the programs, but whether they know what they're doing or know how to,
or if they're any good.
yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah. Well,
Exactly.
but you know, but that goes back to, you know, and I think that when you were talking about validation coming from institutions, and the debt that's incurred. Is there any truth to the fact that if you come out of a Yale MFA, that you know, there's going to be a dealer waiting on you as soon as you graduate, or before you graduate, there's some dealer that's lined up waiting for you to join the stable?
I think there's some truth to it, but it's like rare. You know, it's more of an opportunity because now you in the kind of stable, right? You in the group, but I mean, I'll give you my example. There were some people who graduated with me from Yale that got picked up by galleries immediately. I was not one of them. You know, I got out of grad school. I had to get a job. I didn't have a studio until, like, my own studio separated from where I live until 2018. You know, so I was working out of my apartment, my bedroom, which I like to call my convertible bedroom, because I had a, you know, futon. I flip it up. You know, curator want to come by. Now this is my studio.
That's right.
You know, so my story was more. It wasn't the ideal of what people think is going to happen. You know, when you go to some of these schools, and not just Yale. You know, you're talking about Columbia, maybe Cranbrook, some of these other really great art programs. But like, no matter what, like, for me, you still have to work hard, right? So my situation was I had to have a regular job. I had several jobs. I was still making work, and every now and again I would, you know, land some work in a show. I might get another opportunity here or there. Yeah, but I wasn't able to kind of really, you know, take off or be a full-time artist with just my art as my, like, financial support until, you know, much later. So that's not the truth for everybody. Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but if that be the case, then so, you know, what advice would you give for, let's say, for instance, you have some talented students, great potential at a Duke University, you know, they're studying with Bill Fick, or if you have somebody that's or Beverly McEver over at Duke, or if you have somebody that's coming from a North Carolina Central University, and they don't have the machine behind it. They don't have the name of Yale or something behind it. You know, what advice would you give to a student coming from one of those institutions?
I don't know if this is a Detroit thing, but labor and hard work is kind of in my bones, right?
Yeah,
being from Detroit, so that's always been what I have continued to believe and continue to pursue, and that's what I would tell anybody else is that, no matter what your situation, no matter what you're going through financial, no matter what you might be going through emotional, whatever the case is, you have to make your art. Right, so meaning if you work, you have a job, and sometimes it really sucks. Sometimes you want to just come home, maybe watch some Netflix, eat some food, and
go to
then
sleep
go to
and start
sleep.
again.
Yeah. So if you got a job and whether you get off work at 7 or 8 p.m. or whatever, you set out some time so that you can work on your art. Because if you don't, it's not gonna get done.
Right.
You ain't gonna have nothing to show. You ain't gonna have nothing to talk about.
Right.
So, and that was something that I had to do. When I was working my jobs, when I got off of work, I was making my art.
Yeah. Right.
And and I think that's so important because everybody's not going to have like a Yale or a Columbia or something like that, or the kind of support that these places kind of give you, right? But I think you come from a place, wherever that is, right, before you go to these schools. And I think oftentimes that's the best place to start. When I graduated, immediately after I graduated, I went to Detroit and I talked to George and Namdi.
Right.
And I was like, I want to curate a show.
Mm-hmm.
I want to, and then I curated the show. And, even though I was working,
That's right.
I went back there and I was like, okay, who are some people that I know? Talking to people over here and trying to put together shows over here. So it's about, you can't just wait on somebody to come and save you, right? Because I think that's the idea. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go to Yale, and then afterwards, I'm going to make it in the Studio Museum, and then I'm going to blow up, and I'm going to be super rich.
Yeah. And, and you forgot. You're going to see your face on the cover of Art News or Art America or Art Forum or something.
Exactly.
Front and back cover.
Yeah.
One of the things I've noticed, Mario, is when I've looked at your work, I've said, first things crossed, I said, oh wow, I said, this is like, I said, and this guy must really, understand the Renaissance painters. And but a lot of the work now that I mean, because I love the Renaissance painters. I mean, it's just something about the Renaissance painters, the fullness, the richness, the roundness, and but you don't see much of that. You don't see much of that painting now, and you really don't. I mean, so what's your did you have any influences in terms of some of those Renaissance painters?
Yeah, for me it was the Baroque period, which is right after the Renaissance, that really kind of influenced me, because that for me that was more about this realism, right? You got Caravaggio, you got people like Rembrandt, and you got Velázquez, and Caravaggio's taking actual people and painting directly from them. He got a lot of flog about it. He took a dead body and painted that. And the Renaissance is more about this ideal beauty, right? And for me, I'm also thinking about where I come from, right? And I'm not thinking about idealism and ideal beauty and the perception of what beauty is, but I'm thinking about the reality of my experiences, and that's based in a certain kind of a real world or realism. So those have always been the things that have inspired me, right? Those people and those paintings. And Velázquez to me is at the top. That's the number one right there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, with the painting that you did, I think it was when you were resting after your surgery. I mean, the first thing that crossed my mind, I said, hey, Caravaggio. Well, in closing, I want to thank you, Mario. And are there any last words that you'd like to leave with us, or?
I'm just excited to be here, and I'm actually excited to look through some of the archives. So, thank you.
All right, thank you.